Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nails and Beauty Talk, NFTs, crypto, and Web3. I'm your host, ASIATHABIRD. To have a very special guest with me today. She's a fashion designer, fashion illustrator. She's a CFDA member. Please welcome Marrisa Wilson. Hello, Marrisa. Welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, you're most welcome. So I want to go ahead and ask, where are you from, and tell us about your upbringing.
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Guyanese American. I was born here, born and raised in Jersey.
Hmm.
Um, so I've always really wanted to be in the fashion industry from a really young age.
Hmm.
My mom was really creative and was always doing interior designing around the house. So, it kind of just made sense to me to always kind of be doing creative things. So when I was in the second grade,
Hmm.
I had my first communion, and my mom was kind of redecorating the whole house. So she was,
Right.
reupholstering all of the chairs and, decorating and things like that. And I remember that
Hmm.
she had these little scraps of fabrics around, and that's when I started, playing with them and pinning them to my Barbies and things like that. And that's when
Right.
she started to teach me how to hand sew. And, kind of from there, I kind of continued to, learn to draw and look at magazines and cut out, little pictures and make mood boards and things like that. And then from there, I started taking classes at FIT
Hmm.
on Saturdays. So, took sewing
Hmm.
and drawing. Used to go up once a week from Central Jersey up to the city.
Okay.
And then, I went to Marist College. So I received my degree in fashion design. So I majored in fashion design and I had a double minor in fashion merchandising and product development. And,
Hmm.
I had a ton of internship experiences. So, I started my first internship when I was a senior in high school. And
Hmm.
then from here, there continued on to work at a variety of big companies, small companies, mass labels like private label for Target or,
Hmm.
really small ateliers like Oscar de la Renta, J. Mendel. And
Hmm.
then from there, I received my degree in 2015.
Hmm.
And then that's how I started in the industry.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. So in regards to NFT, not NFT, FIT, excuse me. In regards to FIT, what was that whole experience like just being at FIT?
Yeah, so that was the first, it was helpful for me because, if anyone's looking to get into fashion programs or things like that, you have to have a portfolio. So for
Mhm.
me, it was important to actually kind of have that experience early on because I wouldn't have been able to get into any programs.
Right.
So that was where I first started, to understand what a portfolio looked like
Mhm.
for college admissions. And then I'd also done a pre-college program at Marist, which is where I ended up going to
Mhm.
for my undergrad. Um, but yeah, being able to get into the city and start to learn about the garment district and my internship experiences, you start to find little gems in the garment district. So
Right.
this button store on this corner or on the fabric stores on 37th and things like that. So you start to get familiar with the garment district and where to go, and you start to find your
Right.
favorite places and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's really, really cool because I didn't attend FIT in terms of school. I went to SCAD,
Okay.
Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia. But going to like FIT, particularly with Portfolio Day, they need like specific things like, like realistic stuff and things like that. And I can understand it, but it was like I think I kind of wish they gave you more creative freedom a little bit, because I mean, of course, I just went to only Portfolio Day, but that's what I liked about SCAD because SCAD gives you that creative freedom a lot more, in my opinion.
Yeah, and a lot of programs now. So I work with I was a fashion scholarship fund winner, and I'm still really involved with that organization. But we're starting to kind of think about different ways of portfolios and how to judge or how to interpret or understand talent,
Right.
especially for creatives of color. Oftentimes that
Mhm.
you don't have the opportunity to know that you need all of these different aspects of a portfolio. So that's
Right.
been a really interesting, education is something that, and education and mentorship is something that's really important to me. And,
Mhm.
I had some really great mentors coming up. And so it's important for me to, still be in touch with students and to give back and things like that. But, you know, trying to understand a better way to assess talent,
Right.
because sometimes it's not just about, having Illustrator flats or hand-drawn flats, or,
Right. Right.
sometimes if you're, I was lucky enough to be just outside the city, but if you're somewhere in the Midwest, or, somewhere in the South, like you were, great, lucky enough to go to Seattle. But a lot of people don't understand all of those things. It's, it feels like something
Right.
that's just in New York, it's far away. And
Mm,
it feels like something that is, not attainable. So, I'm grateful for organizations like the Fashion Scholarship Fund are trying to at least think about new and interesting ways of assessing talent.
mm. Yeah, right, most definitely. But in regards to mentors, like who are like the people that have really impacted you in terms of mentors?
Absolutely. So one of my internship bosses, her name is Shauna McGee. I was at a company called Maggie London, and
Mm,
I had that experience when I was a sophomore in college. And I call her my fashion auntie, but she was one of the only, she was at that time, and still to this day, she was the most senior fashion designer
mm.
that I had encountered, or yeah, that I'd encountered, and I've worked for a lot of
Wow.
companies. So she was a senior designer at the time, and I was 18, 19 at the time. So,
Right.
it having that so early on, and then not encountering that, almost
Yeah.
10 years later, it does, like, representation really does make a massive impact. So, I had
Mhm.
some students in my last runway show, I had some students work with me from Marist,
Mm,
some students of color, and, it really does make a difference. And, I know we talk about diversity and inclusion a lot, but,
right.
to hear students tell me now, like, to have your perspective as, a Black woman, a Black Caribbean designer, and things like
Right.
that is, that makes a difference to people. So,
Mm,
I having Shauna in my life, and, the Fashion Scholarship Fund connected me with, my scholarship mentor, and his name is Drew Pizzo, and he was really instrumental in, supporting me and helping me, navigate when I first started my business.
mm,
And so he's the president of an accessories licensing company. And, so I've been surrounded by some really incredibly talented and, really great minds in the industry. So, I try to make sure that when I do have interns, or when I have volunteers or things like that, like, as much as I need to help, I also want to make sure that they're taking things out of
mhm.
it to be able to
Right.
take in their back pocket, and then to, go on to their next role.
Yeah, right, most definitely. Like your work, I've seen like your collections. Your collections are absolutely cool. It reminds me of like a mixture of like, Christian Siriano to a certain degree, but also like Willie Smith and like, Patrick
Mhm.
Kelly to a certain degree. Cause I also like how you really put your culture in the collection. So how do you really combine your culture, with, the influences and, inspirations?
Yeah, my Guyanese heritage is something that, was part of was, a really key focus of, my household growing up, from,
Mm,
just music, and, always growing up with calypso and soca music playing at family parties, food and
mm,
spices,
right.
every Christmas we have pepper pot, slow,
Mm,
pressure cooking on the stove, for days at a time. But my spring 23 collection was called Of Many Waters.
mm,
And Guyana in an Amerindian language means land of many waters. So, for me, kind of taking that retrospective into my culture and where I came from,
right.
I think it was a really important moment for my career to kind of
Mhm.
do that, that analysis and understanding of where I was and where I've come from, and in order to understand, where I'm going, what's important
Right.
to me. And, you know,
Mhm.
I always I always do this exercise with my own work, and I always tell this to other designers who are up and coming. But, something that you always want to ask about your work is why me versus why anyone else, so
Right.
that, and then on top of that, why now? So
Mhm.
for me, it was, I have this unique perspective of, the way that
Mhm.
I grew up. Nobody else, you know, had my upbringing or my experiences other than
Right.
me. So, kind of learning and to you know, kind of diving in there to learn more about Guyana outside of my own lived experiences, and
Right.
then diving into, you know, the origins of Guyana. You know, it only became an independent country just like in the 1970s. So kind of looking at, you know, this Caribbean country in the early 70s as it was going from a British colony into a shift into its own independent nation, was an interesting, you know, exercise to do, because you go
Right.
from, you know, a country that was under British rule into, you know, a shift in society that, you know, had new industries coming up and was starting to, you know, form its own, which is, you know,
Right.
I launched my brand in 2016, but kind of still going through that understanding of, you know, finding my footing and understanding, you know, why me versus why anyone else, and why now. So, you know, I'd recently gone through a little bit of a rebrand, and, you know, did a little bit of did a new logo, and, you know, looked at my branding and did an assessment of, you know, what my brand stands for. And, you know, starting a new brand you know, when I started when I was 22, and, you know, it's right out of school, which is probably not my number one recommendation, but, you know, after, you know, a couple of years, you start to understand, okay, this works. This feels forced. You know, people really respond well to this. This is really what I love doing, you know, and going through that exercise of, you know, okay, looking at my branding package and saying, like, does this represent the clothes? And,
Right.
you know, when I started at the time, you know, I did this branding package and I just started my line, and I, you know, was still learning about myself as a designer. And
Right.
then 4 or 5 years, seasons later, you know, going through production and, you know, creating and going through that, you know, design and development process, you know, I came to an understanding like the prints are the really key focus of the brand. And because I spend so much time either like painting or, you know, hand rendering, hand drawing, and things like that was where I came to an understanding that that was the focus of what my brand and storytelling should be focused around. And, you know, I see you have your mannequin back there, but like, I hate draping. That's totally fine. And, you
Right.
know, for me, it was just like really diving into the textiles and storytelling around that. And then letting that be the focus of, you know, my point of view or what I wanted to say. And then the silhouette was, you know, really just like a canvas for the prints to do the, you know, share their story. So, you know, I work with a lot of really familiar silhouettes. I really don't try to go too crazy, is because I do so many prints, and it's a lot of a lot when you have a, you know, big crazy multicolored print on, you know, a really difficult to
Right.
figure out silhouette. So I've just been trying to arrive at, you know, trying to zero in on, you know, my brand DNA. And, you know, my culture has definitely been one major influence, and that's been something that's always a constant, is, you know, those bold colors and bold prints.
Right. Yeah, that's really, really cool, because I think one thing me and you have in common is, we're not only artists, but we're into, fashion, especially with textile design, and that's something I really like about your work is you're heavily into textiles. And that's the beautiful thing with, certain areas in the diaspora in Africa, especially, with Caribbean culture as well, because, if I look at Nigeria or look at Guyana, you use a lot of bright colors, the garments are very bright colors, patterns. It's really, really cool to see that. So I really like how you add your culture, but also a touch of streetwear, sophistication and class within your work.
Thank you. And yeah, as far as that's something that, you know, looking at my own style and my own point of view and how I dress, like I don't really like fussy chiffons, and that's something that you won't
Yeah.
find from me.
Right.
Like if it feels like too, you know, too frou-frou or too difficult to wear, then you probably won't find that from one of my collections.
Right.
But I do, you know, I also come from menswear too. So I do
Mhm.
like more of like a utilitarian, you know, adding those design elements in there, mixing with, you know, bright colors and prints. And so having those kind of elements in there. So you know, I do a lot of dresses. Do really well for us. and also tailoring as well. And having those as really the key statements of, my collections, and then you can have that high-low dressing where you can dress it up with some heels, or you can pair it down with with a big pair of boots. So, we partnered with Doc Martens, and it's interesting when you talk about styling and things like that, because we had some of the girls come in and we'd really love some of the girls, but they couldn't walk in heels. So we'd be like she'd have like a really striking look, or she'd, have a really cool vibe, could not walk in heels. So we'd be like, why don't you put these boots on and then do it again? And then you could just see, and then that's sort of like the relationship that we like to build with, our models and, our creative partners, because, a big part of my brand is just like, I want people to feel comfortable in their clothes. Like, I don't want to feel like, because oftentimes a model's job is to, you're presenting the brand in the way that they would like you to be. So, what I really look for is like, would this girl wear this outfit, in her regular life? I don't want her to try to transform into, some version of, the Marrisa Wilson archetype that is not her, so that's why we do that. If a girl looks like she can't walk in heels, but she's she's more of a boot girl, and then you can see them just get more comfortable and just like kind of lean into it a little bit more, and just their own personality starts to show through, which is really something that I love seeing when people wear my clothes, is that they feel like, they feel really good about the clothes that they're wearing. Their own personality comes out and shines through. So that's a really important thing for me. And, whether she's a girlier girl and she likes, some of the dresses that we did, or if she, likes some of our tailoring with like all these utilitarian pockets with like a chunky boot. And like, those are all aspects of, how I dress on different days. So, some people like to, play it up and play it down, or mix it up.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I definitely want to switch gears and talk about NFTs. So how'd you get into NFTs, and talk about the Women's Prerogative NFT collection you have?
Yeah, so I started to, it was about last summer was when I first heard about NFTs and Metaverse and all of these really weird and out there concepts. And so for the last year, I kind of February was when I really first dove into the space, but I'd done a lot of research. Firstly, I was intrigued by how race is impacted by new technologies. So my work in Web2 is really focused around diversity and inclusion. And then when I started to understand that there was this entire new world that had commerce and exchange of goods and art and culture and all of those things, like I started to see like this is another world that is being built right now, another community, another destination, place to be. And for me, it was important for me to make sure that I understood what was happening in this space, and as an artist, take the time to learn and understand the space, because in these new societies and places and things like that, if we ourselves as women and women of color don't have a point of view in what Web3 can look like, then someone else is going to artificially do it on our behalf. So that was a really important thing for me to dive into the space and understand. So, fast forward to around August was my Women's Prerogative first collection drop. And it was a collection of all of my past fashion illustrations that I put together in, this small little drop. And we sold out in about a week. And what I did with that was that I offered holders a ticket to my Spring 23 runway show, which I showed in September. And from there, started getting this really tight-knit but really enthusiastic community. And, and then eventually, my partner, Ben, and I have been, just getting to know people in the space and navigating. And then, we connected with SUPERRARE, and then I was invited to be a SUPERRARE artist. And then what we did with SUPERRARE was that I released my first Genesis print artwork collection. And what that was that, you know, I took a handful of my print illustrations, not my fashion illustrations, but, you know, some of my renderings of the print before I scan them in, and then they get put on the fabric. So I used that as my first collection on SUPERRARE, and that holders of those print pieces were title sponsors of my runway show. So that we gave them, you know, front row seats and, you know, VIP access and things like that. And they were also able to get, you know, some framed prints. We just shipped those out, and they came out really well. And then they're going to get a custom jacket, which is it was just put into work of the print that they bought, that they purchased in a custom trucker jacket. So that was, you know, that was that first collection. And then during the runway show, we launched our second collection, which was, you know, the actual fashion illustrations, the looks that were coming down the runway. During the live stream, you could shop the fashion illustration NFT in real time. So if you're watching the live stream from home, you could, you know, you can place a bid. If you were at the show, we had QR codes that you could, you know, we had a run of show, so you can see, okay, you know, look 7, you know, was associated with an NFT. You can see that look 7 was coming down. You can scan, and then you can start the bid. So with that actually happened at the show. We had 2 bids start before the end of the show, which was pretty cool.
Wow, that's really, really cool. That's really amazing. But I definitely want to get into in regards to the NFT space, because, you know, there's been talks about like wearables, you know, AR and VR, and, you know, people are getting big into wearable fashion in the metaverse. So in your perspective, what do you think in regards to NFTs and the metaverse, and like how it will impact the fashion industry in your perspective?
I think the industry at large is absolutely like massive business for wearables, and, you know, being able to, you know, dress your avatar. I think we're a long ways out just for, you know, a variety of technical ability, you know, limitations based on where we are right now. Interoperability is, you know, that fancy word that we throw out a lot, that, you know, if you buy it on one platform, or if you buy the, you know, it's not going to be compatible across different platforms and things like that. So, you know, I think the industry, I think wearables is a much larger opportunity in the gaming space. And it is a great opportunity for people who are interested in fashion, but not physical clothes, to now be able to participate and have, you know, be able to collect, you know, the digital version of that garment. And because gaming is, you know, another way to communicate and to socialize and to hang out with your friends and to show up, you know, so I think for, you know, longer term opportunities, you know, you go where the customer is, and, you know, the next generation of customers, you know, that's how a lot of these big brands are introducing themselves. So like you see a lot of like Gucci's and Balenciagas and those big brands, like they're connecting with the younger generation where they are, and where they are is in these gaming platforms. So, you know, I think on a larger, in a macro sense, it makes sense. I think for me, with where I am right now and bandwidth, and, you know, because I do run a physical to Web2 brand and design and development in the, you know, doing the physical garments, I see it's not necessarily wearables, but the similar technology. So like Clo or Browseware, or any of those programs, I think would be more helpful for me in a internal product development sense. And if, you know, I wanted to translate that into, you know, mint those, I think that might be, you know, that would probably be my take for, you know, my brand into wearables. But, you know, I see a bigger opportunity for me is in the art space, because I think that when we think about fashion and NFTs, you automatically think about wearables. But I think that art and community is actually a really interesting take for me as a, you know, a small brand, and as, you know, a textile and, traditional medium artist, I think that makes the most sense to me, because, what I want to do with my brand is be a bridge to Web 2 and to Web 3 and vice versa. So, working within fashion illustrations feels like it makes the most sense to me, because I've been doing this all along. It's just that, the output is a digital file. That's what that NFT is. But I've had fans of my brand who have seen my fashion illustrations, and it's like, I want that hanging on my wall. So being able to use the same art and then be able to flex, whether it's a physical or a digital platform or output, for me feels like it's the easiest way to, onboard people from Web 2 into Web 3. I've had customers, what I also do with, the Women's Prerogative Project is that I offer all of my customers, all of my collectors, a 50% discount to my website. So, which is a way to, introduce people from Web 3 to my physical brand. But then also, people who have bought my physical clothes and are like, oh, I want that discount, have that's been, a easy not easy, but it's been it's been a helpful transition to get people onboarded into the space, because they're seeing that utility. And then also just this, the success of one, in Web 2 helps the success of the other. So when I do shows and presentations and release a new collection and then release the NFTs as part of it, I kind of see this as just like a holistic strategy. It's just like different products, just like you have, you maybe won't sell your jackets and your warm doors in Florida or LA. Now I'm seeing NFTs as part of, the collection assortment. So people can participate and, have access into the brand. Maybe not, and maybe they're not going to they'll watch the show and maybe they won't end up getting the dress from it. Maybe they won't end up getting look 3 once it hits the stores, but they'll look out for the illustration that's coming with it, or that's released around that time period. So, using both of those opportunities to help both of those worlds is really, really, I see how myself growing in the space.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. But definitely I want to go ahead and ask, what are some pieces of advice you would give for someone who's a fashion designer that want to jump into NFTs?
Fashion designer who wants to jump into NFTs, I would say I wouldn't jump into something that's not familiar. I would, I would take an aspect or your point of view as a designer and use that as your starting place and see what that looks like in a digital sense. So maybe if you're, maybe if you are focused around draping and movement of fabric, then maybe, that might make more sense around, 3D renderings or augmented reality or things like that. So, I would definitely take your strengths in Web 2 and explore what that can flex and look like in Web 3. What I've found is that I've been sharing process, and I've learned over time that showing the process is what people are really interested in, the storytelling and the development. So I've kind of just leaned into that and made the product the process, and kind of just like learned to let go and just start to be more open. So that's been kind of what I've been finding has been working and people are responding to. So certainly take whatever strengths that are that work for you in Web 2 and find creative ways. And not everything is necessarily really buzzy, and I don't think you don't have to do like a super highly technical drop or release, or even something that's very big at all. You can start small, and then certainly just like get into the space and meet the community and talk to people, because that was the first thing that I did from February up until August, was just I didn't put anything out during that entire period. And at some point I was just like, all right, here, and I just like put out that first small collection, not really expecting too much. But if I hadn't just jumped in, I probably would have been tinkering with that same collection for God knows how long. So, you can figure it out along the way. And I don't think anyone is that much more further than you in understanding the space. Like, everyone's figuring it out. So, you can start somewhere and you can start small.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's the thing with NFTs. Like, I'm still trying to understand it. It's still really new, because I thought to myself when I jumped into it, like learning about it, like particularly like in the spring, I was like, am I too late for this? Because people already having NFT collections and already successful. Like, am I too late of knowing this stuff? So really, when you think about it and when you look at it, it's pretty new.
Yeah. Yeah, it's new to everyone and it changes so quickly. That was kind of that's a great piece of advice in Web3, but that was also one of my pieces of, one of my biggest learnings when I got into the industry is that like no one really knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I felt like, I remember going through all these internship experiences and like looking up to these VPs and creative directors. And I was like, how do I acquire? I was like, I'm never going to have the amount of wealth of information that, all of these people are going to have. And then I like have this particular moment, when I was working at, I was working at DKNY and we were working on the launch of the menswear license. And I remember one of our big execs, it was like a startup team. It was really small within, a massive corporation, but we didn't have like the benefits of, having been running for all of these years and having all this volume of business. So it really was just like starting from zero. And I remember, we were in a meeting and one of my, execs, he just like sighs and he was just like, I don't know. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know? And that was just like such an aha moment for me. It's just like, when people like, especially in Web3 and, it's like people haven't been doing this for like no one, if anyone in Web3 tells you they've been doing anything for 10 years, like one, if they have been, then whatever they've been doing, they just need to kind of like throw it out and start again because everyone is really just figuring things out. And that was kind of, that helped me kind of made things not feel so big and scary and unattainable. It's just like, everyone's just figuring it out. And just like, as you get older and as you do things more, you just have more experiences to pull from. But it's still just like your best guess. So,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of also one of my life industry job pieces of advice that, also works in Web3. It's just like everyone's just figuring it out.
Yeah, right, exactly, most definitely. Last but not least, where can people find you on social media and how can people support you, your work, and your fashion illustrations and your designs?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram or on Twitter. It's Marrisa Wilson NY. My name is with 2 R's and 1 S. Marrisa Wilson NY. So you can find me on Instagram or Twitter. If you want to shop one of my physical collections, you can find me at marrisawilsonny.com. And currently I'm working on a project called 30 Days Inside the Studio, where I release a sketch a day and you get to follow along on the journey of developing my fall 23 collection. And yeah, so if you want to follow along that journey, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm going to be releasing more sketches at the end of this week. You can see some of them back here coming to life.
That's really cool.
So really building on a real life runway collection that's going to show in February. So you get to come along on, early concept and, get to see from where we start and then be able to be part of the journey when we finally show in February. And just I'm here if, anybody has any questions or wants to learn about the industry or need advice. You can always reach out, send a DM, and I'm happy to help.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marrisa, for jumping onto the show. Your work is absolutely great. And I've been watching some of your illustrations. Like, they're really, really amazing. Like, I love the fashion illustrations. I love what you represent. Like I said, you remind me a little bit of Willie Smith and, having that whimsicalness, but also being in touch with your Guyanian culture. So that's really, really cool. Thank you so much. I had a very fun conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bell for notifications. Also, follow me on my social media platforms and visit my website, ASIATHABIRD.com, and be on the lookout for more interviews involving Web3, NFTs, crypto, and the Metaverse.